Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Hey, it's a Friday on the Investigative Journal, and glad you joined me. It's July 28th, 2017 day on our calendar, almost done with the month. And let's clean up the week. I've got a lot of little stories that I didn't get through all through the week, and that's what I usually do. I check off the ones I get to, the ones I don't, and I got a lot of little tidbits. But sometimes little things are more important than the big things. Isn't that true in life? You know, we always say, let's think of the big picture, let's look at the big picture, but you got to pay attention to detail. You got to pay attention to detail and the little things. Okay, so we're going to start out with a little, I have to mention my pledge drive to keep this show going. And if you go to my website at Arctic Beacon, that's ARCTICBEACON.com, it'll direct you to this site, which is my new site that we're getting going. It's called Greg Anthony's Journal.wordpress.com. And press the donate button. Every little bit helps. We're listener sponsored. And what that means is people in the mainstream, even the alternative media, most of these people, there's so many COINTEL people on the alternative media, it's insane. But they don't need funding from you because they get it from inside. They get it from Soros or wherever the money comes from. So they can control every narrative on the planet, no matter where you go. So if you want to keep some independent people around, independent people like me that know what's going on from the inside out, because I worked in the mainstream and the alternative with some of those crooks, then you're going to have to support it, and you got to put your money where your mouth is sometimes. So you got to do that, and I'm going to put a real deadline on this. If I can't get what I need in the next, 30 days, I've done this show for God knows going on over 12 years, and I've put in a lot of time and hours. I'd like to keep doing it, but everything has to come to an end, and maybe that's what this is all about. I don't know. But until that day, we're still here, and hopefully some people will help. And I got another little project going on that I'm going to talk about later. Like I said, I'm talking about a lot of little things, but they're really some big things. Now, I got some flack on a post I put on my blog on my new site, and the title was The Last of the Mafia Mohicans. I thought that was pretty good. And I entitled it The Mob Cosa Nostra, the Camorra. Let me read it to you, and then I'll tell you the flack I got, and I'm going to explain myself. And I said, I knew some of these people, met them, had coffee with them, drank wine with them when I lived in Italy, and when I returned to New York, interviewed Tony Gambino, grandson of the boss. He was straightforward. So would you be, folks, after spending more than, I think he was in jail for 20 years. As America sits now, someday you will wish they were back. You think about that. As what we have now is much, much worse. There are no rules now. None. Rules most people don't even understand. One of my favorite actors said it best when he portrayed the Teflon Don, John Gotti, or what I say, the last of the New York Mohicans. Now let me play this, and then I'm going to explain the flack I got from some people, and then I'm going to explain myself. So let's listen. Hopefully we can get this playing quickly here, and I will give it a shot. Here we go. Let's see. It's going to come up in a second, and I'm potting it up.
And I think of Neil. And if he was sitting there right now, what he'd say to me? He'd say, John, what's it about? What's life about? If you don't go through it as a man's man. He said, suck it up. Take the fall, do the time. That's made you who you are. That makes you what you are. How long have we been around this thing of ours? This Cosa Nostra. 120 years. I mean, what's it about? It's about the rules. Parameters. When you take the beating for the friend, you don't run, you don't lay down. You don't betray who you are. What you are.
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem is basic. You pick it up in the street. That goes with the street. You got to remember Angie here. I love this guy. I loved him. And he was stupid. He never listened to me. He was one of the goddamn dope money. He never rolled. Do you know that? He never rolled. My brother Gene, Joey, the Mig, they don't roll. They're doing 1,000 years now. They don't roll. They don't rat. Why? That's the rule. You don't break, you don't rat. Basic rules. Gives you a little power, right? Not the kind of power these feds have. God forbid, right? God forbid we pull their chain in public, right? Fucking dress better than them. They take it personal, like it's a fucking vendetta. Right? They're supposed to act better than the rest of us. Just want me to be something I wasn't even born to be. Humble. They want you to be humble. Yeah, so you humble me. What you got now? You got a war. You got a global war. You got the Chinks, you got the Dominicans, the Asians, the Russians, the Colombians, the Jamaicans. What they doing? They desecrate the nation. You got your veritable fucking snowstorms of cocaine and smack, whatever the hell else they shove in their veins. You got a worldwide crime syndicate now. There's no rules. There's no parameters. There's no feelings. There's no feelings for this country. Anarchy. You got anarchy. So, 5-10 years from now, they're gonna wish it was American Cosa Nostra. 5-10 years from now, they're gonna miss John Gotti.
But let me explain myself now. Okay, I got a couple emails. One guy says to me, boy, didn't realize you support the mob and all of their bad things. And, he goes on and on. They kill people. They do this. And it was one of those things like, come on, man. Did you really listen to what I was saying? Or what that little blog I put was really saying? And here's the deal. I don't support what they do. Sure, I met a few of them. Some of them I didn't even know who they were. And I probably met a lot more not knowing who they were. But never in my life did I get involved with them. And I never supported what they really do behind the scenes. And I know it's a murderous outfit. And I know nobody knows better than me when I was in Italy and I got first-hand view of what this is really like. Now listen, I've done a story years ago about a guy named Mario Cuomo who lived in the little town I lived in Campagnano di Roma, and he liked me. And he portrayed himself as a rich businessman, a landman. And he was a young guy, drove a Ferrari. And every morning he would see me in the coffee shop, and he wanted to talk about America. And we would talk about it. And then, I'd come back, and if he'd see me, he'd buy me dinner. And we'd talk, but there was never any talk about the mob. I didn't even know he was in the mob. Until one fateful morning, I was reading the Corriere della Sera in Piazza Barberini, and I see him splattered all over the front page, shot in a barbershop, just like you see in the movies. But this was real blood on that picture in the newspaper, not the fake blood they use in all these false flag events here. And I found out later that Mario was one of the top guys in the Camorra, which is the most ruthless of groups, and that's the Naples Mafia. And they were at a blood war with the Sicilian Mafia. And so they were, so if you think I'm glamorizing this stuff, forget about it. What I'm telling you is that I learned about it. And when to make the story even, to really emphasize what was going on at the time, I didn't even know he had a family, really. He had a huge family, I found out. He lived in a villa above where I lived in Campagnano di Roma. And I found out his family had to split because there was a blood war going on. They were not only killing like him, they wanted to wipe out every piece of bloodline he had. And so to glamorize this stuff, I wasn't doing. What I was saying was that there is always going to be evil. And when you start replacing a connection between the mob and our government, which had a little, look, what I'm doing is comparing, apples to apples here. You got one bad apple. Now you got 20 bad apples working, like he was saying, John Gotti was saying. You got no love. Look, you might think these people didn't like America, but then, sometimes they stood up for it. Now you got people here who want to tear it down. You got so many groups now that want to just rip this country apart, and our government's allowing it. And in the meantime, they were using the mob to make Americans think that they were controlling crime. It only escalated it. And so through the years, I did meet these people. When I came back to New York, I ended up meeting a guy. He was in the Mafia. I didn't know it. I was one of those handsome cab drivers. And he owned 10 medallions at about $100,000 each. And I met him because I had to get a job in an Italian restaurant when I returned from Italy, because I had like $25 in my pocket. And I had to get a job on the east side at an Italian restaurant. And one thing led to another. And I'm working this night shift, in an east side restaurant, waiting on tables, and they were enthralled. All these Italian guys. It had to be a mob party, looking back on it. But they were nice guys. I didn't get involved in their business. And they tip well. A hell of a lot better than when you go into Applebee's and you're working a table. You got these stingy Americans won't even give you $1. The guy that gave me that job, he stuffed $100 in my pocket for good service and a lot of time talking about Italy and talking Italian. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, do I glamorize the Mafia? Do it just like everybody else when they watch the movies. You know that. We all love The Godfather. How many times? Probably 3 of the best films ever crafted were the Godfather trilogy. Yeah, it was pretty good. And I don't think anybody will say it's not. But I was not glamorizing to the one. Then another guy emails me and says, you ought to be kicked off the air for talking like that to our children. I've said, I'm not doing a children's show. It's on in the evening, and I always, said to people, this is not a children's show. Do I have to put a disclaimer on it before I start? Do you think I want kids to know that are 10 and 15 years old about the Vatican and all this stuff going on? Do I want them to know about the story in the news today about the child trafficking? No, that's what this show's about. So don't let your little kids. I wouldn't let my kids listen. If you want to do that, there's other shows that you can go to where your kids can listen and get a Bible lesson or something. Here you're getting a lesson a little bit, on the street as well. You got to learn both. So anyway, that's that. Now, let me get on to my next little tidbit today on Friday to clear off this desk so there's nothing remaining on it when I come back Monday. Okay, I got to do this because it's always interested me. I hate this guy's voice that's going to narrate this 5, 6, 7 minute clip. But I want to talk about Yellowstone because I really think the Caldera there is dangerous. And I said years ago, boy, if that thing blows, forget about it. Forget about America, forget about the world. And there's some signs that things are strange over there. And you people living up in the Northwest, there ain't going to be a Northwest. If you're near that thing, or if you're in a 100-mile radius in 3 states, it'll be covered with 3 foot of ash. We won't even be able to breathe hardly. There'll be ash all over the place, and the air will be polluted. There won't be sunshine like there used to be. This is huge. Now, it could blow tomorrow. It could blow in 1,000 years. But how many people even think about it? And the reason I'm thinking about it is because I had it on my desk. I said, I got to talk about Yellowstone. And so I found this guy that did this. It's pretty good. He said, what you need to know, but I hate his voice. But we'll put up with it just because the content is pretty interesting. Here we go.
A lake of molten carbon was discovered by researchers in May of this year, running under 15 states in the western U.S. The release of only 1% of it would be equal to all the oil humanity has burned for the last 65 years. The release valve for the huge reservoir of carbonate magma is the supervolcano at Yellowstone. June of this year, a series of earthquakes numbering in the hundreds began to rumble through Yellowstone National Park in a phenomenon known as a swarm. An increase in seismic activity can mean that a volcanic eruption is about to take place. A normal volcano has the shape of a cone, built up from repeated eruptions. A supervolcano has too large an area to support a cone. Instead, it leaves a caldera, a depression in the earth, like a crater. The Yellowstone caldera is almost half the size of the national park itself. An eruption at Yellowstone would cover most of the United States with ash. Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana would be buried in several feet of ash, resulting in death for 28 million inhabitants. A massive amount of sulfuric mist would also be ejected, changing our global weather. The acidic aerosol would remain in the atmosphere for years, screening out sunlight, causing temperatures to drop all over the planet, killing crops for many seasons. It has been prophesied by Mark Taylor that a sign like this will be given. Retired fireman and respected clairvoyant, Mark Taylor successfully predicted the presidential election. He also foresaw a volcano that will spring forth from the depths.
Hey, wait a minute, this clairvoyant stuff. I predicted the presidential election. Does that make me a clairvoyant? All right, let's move on.
Yellowstone Park geologist Dr. Henry Heisler said that a super eruption would follow within 2 weeks when area earthquakes reached a magnitude of 4.5, which has already happened. Heisler said also that changes in geyser activity would precede the volcanic explosion. Black smoke has been rising from the park's most famous geyser, Old Faithful. This means that rocks are melting underground. One day late in June, Old Faithful violated its well-known pattern when it discharged boiling, steaming water 2 times in a row instead of once. Large numbers of animals, bison and elk, have been seen leaving the park in recent weeks. This exodus has been confirmed by park authorities, who have no explanation, other than the uncanny ability of some animal species to anticipate natural disasters such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Many local landowning ranchers are leaving too, after being frightened by strange behavior among their own livestock. The federal government has a massive evacuation plan for the worst-case scenario, which until recently was kept secret. When the Yellowstone supervolcano erupts, millions of United States citizens could end up in Brazil and Argentina, 2 countries which have each accepted a payment of $10 billion to provide temporary refugee housing for displaced Americans. As the United States Geological Survey tracks the earthquake swarms, which are moving nearer to the Yellowstone caldera, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration has been mobilized to monitor the site from above. In addition to satellite imagery, NASA is now flying over the national park on a regular basis. With Sophia, the world's largest airborne observatory. The jet aircraft is normally used for astronomical observation, but NASA has turned its infrared cameras toward Earth to capture images of the growing lake of red-hot magma in the Earth's mantle under the state of Wyoming. Just this past week, a massive chasm in the ground has opened up next to the Yellowstone Caldera. The federal government is contemplating yet another misguided strategy to release the pressure of the rising magma by detonating a small nuclear device on top of the dome at Sour Creek, one of the known weak spots in the caldera of the supervolcano.
Okay, so we're all done with that. We got about, I don't know. What do we got? 2 minutes here, 2-3 minutes before the break. And I've got 3 more things I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about an article I did on, or a show I did on miracles, and someone who sent me some interesting information on that. And then I'm going to talk about the Pilar. Do you know what the Pilar is? It's Pilar. I'm having fun this week. I'm not telling you. I'm making you look it up. So we're going to talk about the Pilar. And now if you're smart, you'll just wait and come back the second half hour. Then I'm going to talk about Susan Lindauer. And her name creeping into the news again. And I'll tell you who she is. And my encounter with Susan Lindauer years ago when she was Andy. You know who Andy Card is? Andy Card. Well, I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to come back to the second half hour. But Susan Lindauer is a relative of Andy Card. And boy, I was one of the first to interview her years ago regarding some really crazy stuff around 9/11 and the war in Iraq and all this stuff. She's still around today. I remember even a couple years after I interviewed her, I said she's got to be connected to these people because they love to get information out and control it. But she's still out there, and she did an interview with some Scottish reporters. And I'm going to play that for you. I love these guys' voice. That's the only reason I'm doing it. I love the Scottish and the Irish accent. In fact, I think I'm going to move there just to learn it. And I think for days I'll just go around talking like them. Because it's much easier. In fact, let's speak about language a little bit because I got a minute to burn here before I can cover those 3 things. That's the last 3 things I want to do this week. Then I will not think about you, listeners, or this show for at least 48 hours or maybe even longer. And I'm going to do something fun this weekend. And I'll report on that Monday. You do the same. Okay. Now, what was I going to say? Language. That's right. Italian is quick. It is very quick. But it's not as quick as some people that speak Spanish. I tell you something. I've met a couple of people that they don't come up for air for 20 minutes. It's incredible. And I'm following this language, and I can't understand a word when they talk that fast. But I remember when I was in Italy, I couldn't understand either when they spoke quickly, and then I picked it up. It's kind of like trying to understand Cockney or a New Yorker from Brooklyn. But anyway, Spanish is quicker than Italian, and it's even quicker than those Brooklyn guys. But I'll tell you, the worst is a Cockney accent. I was in England. I couldn't understand the guy at all. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis. as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour on this July 28th, 2017 day on our calendar, the Investigative Journal. Got 3 things left to talk about. Got my desk cleared off. I got to do it. So I'm going to talk fast. Remember I said they talk fast in Spain, they talk fast in Mexico, and Italy, and the Bronx. They talk fast in Chicago. They talk fast in, the Cockney accent in England. So we're going to talk fast here. We got to get it out of the way. The 3 things are this: miracles. Second is the Pular. And third is Susan Lindauer. All right, miracles. I was doing a show and I started talking off-cut. I wasn't even thinking about doing that. Started talking about why aren't there any miracles since Christ was here? We had all these things, the bread in the water, all this stuff, water into wine, all these different unbelievable miracles. And then I said, well, they just dried up. And then I started joking about, what is a miracle? Is a miracle, there's so many things people say. They use the word like, God, it was a miracle I got up today. It was a miracle that the Cubs won today. It was a miracle that, I didn't get hit by that bus. I just was looking at my cell phone and I didn't hear the bus coming because I had my earphones. I mean, these people that wear earphones and they're walking around, man, they're going to get killed. They don't look where they're going. They don't hear what's around them. I mean, don't go into the forest. You'll be eaten alive. They look for people like you, people that are lame. You got to keep your senses about you in the wilderness and in the city. But anyway, so I started joking about a miracle. Miracles aren't what they used to be. And I said the other day to one of my, I stopped in to have a little aperitivo with a friend, and I said, God, it'll be a miracle if that waiter ever comes here. And he did. So is that a miracle? Well, let me say this before I read what was sent to me. I had a half miracle happen just the other day. To make it a whole miracle, something else has to happen. Because it truly was a miracle, at least from my perspective. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But he sends me this thing, and it's, of course, biblical. And he started to say, Greg, maybe you'd be interested. And I said, of course. I'm an equal opportunity person. I will listen to everything. So he says, maybe this will help you. And he didn't come across really pushy, like, Greg, you don't know what you're talking about. Greg, you don't do this. Greg, you don't do that. He just said, read these two long pieces. And they were very long, but he was very nice. He said, Greg, if you really, I know they're long, go to the last 4 paragraphs of the first article I sent you. So I did, and I'm going to read that to you. And he said this: purpose in early Christian congregation. Miracles served a number of important purposes. Most basic, they helped to establish or confirm the fact that a man was receiving power and support from God. I'm not going to read you the Bible verses. Both with Moses and Jesus, people drew this correct conclusion. Through Moses, God had promised a coming prophet. Jesus' miracles helped observers to identify him as that one. All right. When Christianity was young, miracles worked in conjunction with the message to help individuals see that God was behind Christianity and had turned from the earlier Jewish system of things. In time, miracle gifts present in the first century would pass away. They were needed only during the infancy of the Christian congregation. In reading the history of Acts of the Apostles, we see that Jehovah's Spirit was working mightily, speedily, forming congregations, getting Christianity firmly established. In a few short years, between 33 and 70 CE, thousands of believers were gathered in many congregations from Babylon to Rome, and perhaps even farthest west. It is worthy of a note that copies of the Scriptures then were few. Usually only the well-to-do possessed scrolls or books of any sort. In pagan lands, there was no knowledge of the Bible or God or the Bible, Jehovah, nothing. Virtually everything had to be done by word of mouth. There were no Bible commentaries, concordances, encyclopedias readily at hand, so the miraculous gifts of special knowledge, wisdom, speaking in tongues, and discernment of inspired utterances were vital for the congregation then. But as the Apostle Paul wrote, when those things were no longer needed, they would pass away. I didn't know he wrote that. Did he write that? Okay. Somebody check that out for me. And check that thing about speaking in tongues. I don't know. I've never understood that. Okay, a different situation today. We do not see God performing such miracles by the hands of his Christian servants today, because all needed things are present and available to the illiterate population of the world. Oh, really? And to help those who cannot read but who will listen, there are mature Christians who have knowledge and wisdom gained by study and experience. It is not necessary for God to perform such miracles at this time, to attest to Jesus Christ as God's appointed deliverer, or to provide proof that he is backing up his servants. Even if God were to continue to give his servants the ability to perform miracles, that would not convince everyone. For not everyone, all the witnesses of Jesus' miracles, were moved to accept his teachings. On the other hand, scoffers are warned by the Bible that there will be a stupendous acts of God performed in the destruction of the present system of things. In conclusion, it may be said that either those who deny the existence of miracles do not believe there is an invisible God or Creator, or they believe that He has not exercised His power in any superhuman way since creation. But their unbelief does not make the Word of God have no effect. The biblical accounts of God's miracles and the good purpose that they accomplished, always in harmony with the truths and principles found in His Word, still instill confidence in God. They give strong assurance that God cares for mankind and that He can and will protect those who serve Him. The miracles provide typical patterns, and the record of them builds faith that God will in the future intervene in a miraculous way, healing and blessing faithful humankind. Boy. Okay. So that was sent to me, and I really thank him because at least I know there's one person listening. And you take it for what it's worth. And my thoughts while I was reading that were, boy, I think people could use a good miracle these days, and not these fake Mother Mary miracles that the Vatican puts on us. We get too many of these fakes. So I think we rely on what happens to us in life in spite of God's reluctance to think that we need it. I mean, I guess He knows more than we do, but I think, if I could get a word in edgewise and maybe send Him a sticky note or something and say, hey, a couple good ones might help, because you don't have as many followers as you think you do here. The way this was written, it's like, nobody needs a miracle anymore. We're all pretty good. I don't know about that. Maybe God would reconsider that. I have my right to put in my 2 cents. So anyway, that leads to the next story that I have to get off my desk, and hopefully I'll get to Susan Lindauer, because I'll be very upset. I'll be thinking about her all weekend, and I don't want to do that. Half miracle, what happened? And how can the whole miracle happen? And is it a miracle? Well, for me it is, because it's incredible. Because the other day I was talking about, and this is really for a friend of mine that I've really been friends with a long time, and this man writes screenplays, a great writer, and doesn't seem to ever get a good shake. And I've known him for over 25 years, and his writing is excellent. He never seems to get that one push he needs to really make it. And I've seen this happen before in life. A good friend of mine in Rome, he didn't get his first really big shot in acting until he was like 68 years old. And he was a young theater performer, but he came to Rome because of his life had been a mess. And I watched him go from the outhouse to the penthouse. And I hope the same happens for my buddy here. And he has written a number of things, and one thing he's been passionate about his whole life was Ernest Hemingway. And that's how we have that in common, because I was passionate about him as well, and so we'll leave it at that, because I could spend the whole show talking about it. Well, anyway, we came up with an idea to do a business called, we're going to do Hemingway charters, and we had to find the proper boat, because Hemingway's boat is very famous. It's called the Pilar, and it's a 1939, built in those years, Wheeler, and Wheeler was one of the best boat companies known to man, a wooden boat. And by the way, all these stupid marinas around in Florida and California, don't come to us with a wooden boat. They're dangerous. These people don't know what they're talking about. Problem is, people don't know how to care for wooden boats anymore, but they're actually better than fiberglass. Now, so we have this idea to recreate Hemingway. Now, Bill has written a screenplay about Hemingway, is also things about his life at the end that are going to kind of help this guy. I mean, Hemingway got a bad rap at the end. And I talk to people about him, and they always portray him. He wasn't the guy that's always portrayed in the media. But if you read some of his books, you'll see behind the scenes who he really was. And he didn't kill himself. He was drugged by the CIA. He was electroshocked to death. And they said he shot himself with a shotgun in Idaho. I don't believe it. And I believe this, that some of the things that Bill found out are going to prove that. So we said, well, how can we get this across? So we said, well, why don't we find a replica? Why don't we see if we can find a Pilar? Now, here's the deal. Bill had been looking for 2 or 3 years. And on and off, we'd get back together. And just about 2 months ago, we started really thinking about this, because it would be fun to start this company and create on the boat or one like Hemingway and repattern it, his life. And so we'd have videos, we'd have books, we'd have Bill's screenplay, and we would actually create Hemingway and his friend Sloppy Joe and a few others. We may have a couple of his pals like F. Scott Fitzgerald come aboard, and people would pay to go out and experience what life was like out on the sea with this incredible guy. And so we would create almost a theatrical, yet a literary, yet a very, very realistic view of what was happening in a day in the life of Hemingway when he's on his boat, the Pilar, which he loved. Now, the Pilar is a 39-foot wheeler, or 38-foot wheeler, that he had custom built. Back then, he paid $3,000 for it because he just got a new book contract. He got $3,000 back then. That was a lot of money back then. And he was to do the Whom the Bell Tolls. And if you haven't read it, read it. So he went, and with that money, he wanted to have the Pilar built. And he had it built to his specs. So anyway, let's fast forward. Hemingway is gone. The Pilar sits in his house, behind his house in Cuba, and his grandson renovated it. There's one other wheeler. It's called a wheeler, and I won't tell you the last name. There's three. It was a make of wheeler Playmate. There's three of them left on the face of the earth. The second one's owned by an attorney in Massachusetts. And the third one, Bill had been searching for years. Couldn't find it. What happened to it? Well, the other day, me and him were talking about, just 3 days ago, we were talking about this. And it was one of the days I was doing my miracle stories. And I said, Bill, he said, I found a Matthews. We're going to find some replica and we can renovate it and do that. And we can use that because I don't think we can find a wheeler. I said, okay. So the other day, just 2 days ago, I remember he emailed me all night about stuff he was thinking about. And I woke up in the morning and I was sitting in a little coffee shop before I went in to see some people in an office in downtown where I live. And I emailed him. I said, Bill, I'm going to look around and see if I could find one. I get to the computer and I go, you know what? I'm going to email Craigslist Portland because I'm looking in San Diego, all the big markets. And guess what? I find the third wheeler. Oh, an incredible find. And the guy that just bought it is a renovator of old antiques, motorcycles, everything, boats. And he turns out to be an aficionado of Hemingway. His dad was a Hemingway fanatic. So now we're in the conversations. He wants to sell it, get it renovated, and the price isn't that high. But it's going to be a good chunk of money. And Bill, I talked to him for 3 hours yesterday, fascinating stories. Told him about he loves the project. Bill talked to him today. We're working out the financials, and we don't have the money as of yet, but we're going to get it. And I want to make this guy's dream come true. Because I think if we can get that going, he can get that screenplay finally done. Because it's going to attract attention. And secondly, the half dream was to find it. To find that wheeler. And if I found it in the hands of the most unbelievable person who had the same passion of Hemingway that I had and Bill had. But he's a boat renovator. And he will do all this work. It's an incredible story. To get this boat, the boat's not in bad condition. I'm pretty good with boats. But it needs a lot of work. But we're going to turn it into the exact, because Bill has already got the specs of everything, how Hemingway painted everything. He talked to his grandson, and they got exactly what everything in that boat that we have will look like you're on with Hemingway in 1939 and 40s going through the Keys with Sloppy Joe, F. Fitzgerald, and everybody. And then, of course, we play the music, we do all that kind of stuff. But it will be an exact trip like that for people that want to pay to come on and experience that in one day, maximum 4 to 6 people at a time. So, half of the thing comes true. You find this incredible find. There's only 3 of that's the last one on the planet. because Wheeler doesn't make boats anymore. Oh, a couple have tried to do replicas, but this is the exact boat. Mahogany wood, I mean, it's incredibly. Wheeler was like this boat. In fact, if you don't know, Hemingway survived 3 hurricanes, heavy hurricanes in a Wheeler. The boat is really seaworthy. And so that's the half miracle. Now the second half miracle is to get the money to do it. Now people would say, Greg, you're crazy. You can't even run your radio show and you're trying to get money to buy a boat. I said, listen, if I could get money to buy the boat, I'll have time to do my radio show. In fact, I'll do it right from that boat. And so that is the next dream. We're going to get the money, and I'll report on it. But see, the dreams, when I'm talking about miracles, sometimes that suffices in God's absence, right? I would prefer walking out the door and he taps me on the shoulder and says, you see, I really do exist. That would be, to me, that would end all my doubts, right? Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be nice? Then I go, well, God, no, this is a hologram that the Vatican's doing, and I wouldn't believe it anyway. So, you're caught between a rock and a hard place with dreams. Well, you know what I did? I don't know if I can get to Susan Lindauer. I only got 6 minutes left. And I wouldn't do it justice because by the time I talked about it, we'd have to forget about it. The segment was over, so I'm in that kind of precarious situation where I got about 5.5 minutes left. I finished talking about the pilar and the miracle, the half miracle. Well, why don't we do this? Do you really think you can raise enough money, Greg, to make this happen? And do you really think that you should do that? I'll be thinking about that all evening and all weekend, but I think so. Because it's not only the boat. It's really helping a friend I've known for 30 years realize a dream that he's had. And, he may not think the same way as I do about spiritual things or other things, but we have a close friendship. And I want to see him really get this done. Because I know it means a lot to him. And he spent a lot of time writing this stuff. I mean, he's written many other things. But this would really be great. And I would get satisfaction out of it because I feel the same way about Ernest Hemingway. In fact, when I was young, he kind of inspired me to go overseas. Because I remember, if you know Hemingway's life, he wanted to be a foreign correspondent. He worked for the Kansas City Star, and he went over and became a foreign correspondent in days when that's how they communicated, through cable. And they actually had people there reporting independently what's going on in the war, in World War I. They didn't have the news services owned and paid for by the government and the Vatican giving you bullshit stories. No. And so I said to myself, I gotta, I patterned a little bit. I used to read him all the time, his writing skills, his ability to make something so real. But he wasn't a flamboyant writer. He was a very, very shrewd, calculated, very interesting writer that, you almost could, the words were just the beginning. It was behind those words. You could imagine what was going on. And that's the sign of a good writer. And so I remember, and the way he wrote, it made sense because he was a reporter. And he understood the nuts and bolts of reporting. And I learned it very simply. You got to have you got to be able to communicate quickly to people that are on a train because they only read the newspaper for 20 minutes and then they got to go to work. So you better get that first paragraph right or forget about it. Now people, see, that's what I'm talking about. People that, you got the internet. It degrades people like me. It degrades people like Hemingway. And I'm putting myself in his category. But it degrades good journalists because people think they can get on and go, oh, I'll just put something out there and that's going to be it. They have no idea. In fact, you're not getting paid for it. And it's a real funny thing. And that's why I may carry over those kind of traits. I only wrote because I got paid. Listen, I didn't go out there to save the world. I wrote every day because I got paid for it. And it allowed me to eat and live. And that's the way I feel on this radio show. If I can't eat and live, why the heck would you do it? You think about it. You want to spend 6 hours a day sometimes or longer doing something, you get nothing back in return? Oh, I'm doing it for humanity. Well, I'm doing it because no. I'm doing it because, look, you get information and I get a chance to survive and live. It's not like I'm asking for $1 million. I'm not one of these guys that, people in America are just so ridiculous. They believe it's better to make money off money and do absolutely nothing than to actually work at something, no matter what it is. And that's why I don't like all those Wall Street people and all those people that they just sit there and they just accumulate money and they don't do anything. And that's why I like a guy like this guy I met who has the Pilar. You ought to see his work. I mean, the guy's incredible. He did Hopalong Cassidy's old boat. He did James Dean's old motorcycle, renovated all these things. And he's the kind of guy that goes after things that he doesn't want to see destroyed. And that's kind of what the other side of the coin is, these people that just sit around making money off these schemes. They just destroy people. They destroy themselves. They have no soul. What good is it? And so that's why I say, when I started writing, I wrote because I got paid. Oh, sure. I liked it. It was my profession. But I wouldn't have done it for nothing. And I don't think I have to do this for nothing. It kind of eats at you. Go, I'm worth something here. And maybe it's good to end the week that way because I think you're worth something too. And think about it. Think about it deep. You're going to just wallow your life away and say, hey, I'm not worth anything, but I'm going to do this. No, it's not the way it works. I know it's tough, but sometimes it's good to talk that way. Back next week, Monday, on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.